Throughout the long, blood-stained corridors of history, tales of cruelty and tyranny often rise to the surface, each more shocking than the last. Among these dark narratives, one stands out for its peculiar brand of brutality, a ruler who ruled not only with an iron fist, but with a razor-sharp blade, targeting a single, seemingly mundane offense: lying. In his realm, the cost of dishonesty was unimaginably steep, for those caught uttering falsehoods were met with a punishment so gruesome and final, it left a chilling mark on his kingdom's collective memory. He was the king who ordered the tongues of liars to be severed, turning the act of speech itself into a dangerous gamble, where one's life and voice could be extinguished in an instant. This was no myth or exaggerated rumor passed down through fearful whispers. It was a horrifying reality, woven into the very fabric of governance. From commoners to nobles, no one was exempt from his draconian decree. His reign was defined by a relentless pursuit of what he deemed as truth, though the definition of such truth lay solely at his discretion. Any perceived falsehood, however minor, could result in a brutal public mutilation. The punishment was always carried out in the most humiliating and visible manner, a spectacle designed to instill paralyzing fear in those who dared to speak out of turn. The origins of such a ruthless practice can be traced back to the ruler's early experiences. Born into a world rife with deceit, betrayal, and political manipulation, he had witnessed firsthand how lies could unravel alliances and topple dynasties. From a young age, he learned to despise the forked tongues of courtiers who smiled to one's face while plotting in secret. His upbringing was marked by personal betrayals, family conspiracies, and broken promises, each one chiseling away at any remnants of trust he might have harbored. By the time he ascended to the throne, his disdain for dishonesty had festered into a consuming obsession. Upon assuming power, his first edicts were focused not on rebuilding his fractured kingdom or tending to its people's needs, but on rooting out dishonesty by any means necessary. Spies and informants flourished under his rule, rewarded handsomely for every whisper and accusation they delivered. Courts of truth were established, where citizens were dragged before harsh judges and subjected to brutal interrogations. Truth was not sought, it was forced. Confessions were extracted through torture, and once deemed guilty of lying, the punishment was swift and merciless. The method of execution was as symbolic as it was barbaric. Victims were paraded through the streets, tied and bound, their faces marked with symbols denoting deceit. Crowds gathered as executioners, specially trained in the art of mutilation, approached with gleaming blades. No ceremony softened the blow. No prayers were offered. In front of an audience of terrified onlookers, the tongue of the accused would be gripped with iron tongs and sliced from the root, the severed flesh held aloft as a gruesome warning. The condemned, left to bleed and writhe, were then cast aside, alive but forever silenced. The policy extended beyond individuals. Entire families could suffer if a member was accused of dishonesty. Businesses collapsed, communities fractured, all under the weight of constant surveillance and suspicion. Parents taught their children to speak only when necessary, if at all. Markets fell silent, conversations were reduced to nods and gestures, and the very act of communication became an unbearable risk. Language, once a tool for connection and commerce, became a double-edged sword. As the years wore on, the ruler's paranoia deepened. He trusted no one, not even those who carried out his orders. Ministers and advisors who failed to provide truthful reports, no matter how trivial, were subjected to the same grisly fate. His own court became a mausoleum of the voiceless, filled with mutilated servants and courtiers whose loyalty was measured by their silence. The once vibrant political sphere devolved into an atmosphere of dread, where truth and lies lost all distinction under the shadow of his ruthless justice. Interestingly, there were those who tried to exploit his obsession. Rival factions weaponized the decree, falsely accusing opponents of dishonesty to see their tongues cut out. But such strategies only fed into the king's madness, for he viewed each accusation, true or false, as further proof of the endemic deceitfulness surrounding him. The vicious cycle perpetuated itself, each act of cruelty birthing more paranoia, each punishment breeding more informants and traitors. But tyranny, fueled by fear, is a fragile construct. Beneath the oppressive silence, resentment simmered. Those who had been maimed or witnessed loved ones mutilated harbored deep, festering hatred. The ruler's cruelty sowed the seeds of his undoing, as secret alliances formed among the voiceless, communicating through signs, written messages, and clandestine meetings. Over time, a network of the mutilated, those who had nothing left to lose, grew strong enough to mount a rebellion. The final days of his reign were marked by eerie quiet. Reports of unrest reached his ears, but lacking the tongues to articulate their plans, his enemies remained faceless, silent shadows. His trusted advisors, fearing their own fates, failed to warn him effectively. And so, the uprising unfolded swiftly and without warning. The palace gates were breached, his guards overwhelmed by a force of those he had once silenced. In a final twist of irony, it was not words or lies that led to his downfall, but the very absence of speech. When they found him, huddled and trembling in his grand hall, he begged for mercy. But no voice rose to offer him comfort. No one spoke on his behalf. His enemies, tongueless but resolute, enacted their retribution in grim silence. His end was neither swift nor glorious, and his kingdom, left broken by years of brutality, struggled to recover in the aftermath. Generations later, the story of the ruler who cut out tongues remains a chilling parable. It serves as a haunting reminder of the power of speech, the perils of unchecked authority, and the human spirit's capacity to endure even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Long after the fires of his regime burned out, his name lived on, not as a symbol of strength, but as a cautionary tale of how fear and obsession can silence a nation, until even the voiceless find a way to rise.